Hello, this is Lindy and welcome to Lindy's Magpie Reads. I have got so much to tell you about today. In the past week I had one bail, I listened to 3 audiobooks, I read 2 graphic novels, 1 fiction, 1 nonfiction, 2 children's picture books, 1 fiction, 1 nonfiction, and I read 2 other books as well. So much. Plus, I've got some comments on a cookbook that I have been experimenting with, and I'm going to save that till the end. This is Frida's always got to come and say hello. I'll start with the bail. I did give up on the Manningtree Witches by A.L. Blackmore. It had been 3 weeks since I had picked it up, so I thought, no, I'm just not in the mood for it. I was halfway through, and I didn't get any response from any of people watching my channel who said, persevere, persevere. So I just thought, okay, I'm gonna cut that one off my list. And I had 2 4-star reads and the rest are 5-star reads. So we'll start with the ones that were slightly disappointing. The Island of Missing Trees by Elif Shafak. So this one, it had all the elements that I thought were going to work for me. It's a coming-of-age story about a child of immigrants in Britain. Her father was a Greek Cypriot and her mother a Turkish Muslim Cypriot, and her parents fell in love in 1974 in Cyprus, which was right when the Civil War started, and Cyprus ended up getting divided into 2. Yes, all of that stuff is the kind of book I really like. And there is a unusual viewpoint for part of the story, and that is told from the viewpoint of a fig tree. You know, the kind of figs that you eat, that kind of fig tree. And usually that really works for me. Now, in this case, it was more about the overall tone of the story. I mean, I thought it was good. It just wasn't great for me, because it's a bittersweet kind of story, and I think I wanted more of the salt and less of the syrup, really. Yeah. And the tree ends up dictating history lessons, gets a little preachy. Yeah, there was just a few things that didn't quite work for me. And it does do a really good job, though, of showing how a parent's generation of trauma can be passed down to the next generation. I thought that was done very well. I've read one other book by Elif Shafak, The Bastard of Istanbul, and I gave that one 4 stars also. So I think that's it for me for Elif Shafak. I'm going for 5 stars. So I think her books are okay, but she's not exactly the writer for me, I guess. And I also read a Canadian children's book called Beatrice and Croc Harry. It's by Lawrence Hill, who also wrote the Book of Negroes. And so, as I said, it's a children's book, and it's set in the year 2090, and it's kind of an adventure story. We've got a girl who's 12 years old, Beatrice, and she wakes up with most amnesia. She can look after herself, she can make porridge for herself, but there is no other human beings around. And she doesn't know how she got into this tree house. You can see on the cover, she's in a tree house. And there's a crocodile that becomes her friend, and a rabbit. You get hints that something else is going on, that maybe there's some healing happening, and that eventually she is going to remember things, and she does. It was a little too much suspension of disbelief for me, but there's also some really good elements to this book. And there's also the fig tree. That big tree that the tree house is in is actually a fig tree, but not the edible kind. It's something like a Moreton Bay fig, I guess. There's over 1,000 species in the fig or mulberry family. I just thought that was kind of a good coincidence that I had 2 books with fig trees this year, or this week. Beatrice is a great character. She has brown skin, and when she does encounter other people, they appear to be very unfriendly, and they're calling her Black. And here's one little segment where she says, a hunter in the contested lands called me Black, and the giant called me Black. I hated being reduced to a color. You were right to be upset. They spoke with ugliness in their hearts. But black is another thing when it's said in the right way, when it is said respectfully. It refers to people who have a common origin and whose ancestors came long ago from a place called Africa. So this is the kind of content that I think, if it's younger kids, grade 4 and younger, like if you're reading aloud, I mean, the language is probably suitable for grade 4, but there's some content in there that you might want to have an adult to discuss content with. There's some really funny parts. The crocodile calls her, he says, "You're clearly a willy lump lump." He says, like, a willy lump lump. You're like, is that an insult? In the same ballpark as a fool, an ignoramus. And that's another thing. There's all kinds of fancy vocabulary in here, and made up words. And, Beatrice, she thinks it's really boring to wear the same color of socks on both feet. You know, she's a great character. So that's Beatrice and Croc Harry. Another audiobook that I listened to. Did I say The Island of Missing Trees was an audiobook? I don't think I mentioned that. The audiobook, I'll just back up. So The Island of Missing Trees, it's got 2 narrators, the audiobook narrators. One who's only doing the fig tree, that's Amira Ghazala, and the rest of the story is narrated by Daphne Kuma. So with the final revival of Opal and Nev, that's by Dawnie Walton. So that audiobook is full cast, and the 2 main parts, the 2 main women, are Janina Edwards and Bonnie Turpin. So 2 magnificent audiobook readers. And then there's 15 others who do other parts. It's like an oral history of a rock band that made it big. Well, actually, it was infamous in the 70s. Their record didn't make it big, but what happened at a concert was that a sessional musician who was playing with them, a drummer, died as a result of kind of a riot that happened. And so in contemporary times, that man, the drummer, his daughter is investigating the life story of Opal, black woman who was in that band. And this was on Barack Obama's list of best books of 2021, and Greg of Supposedly Fun mentioned it, I think, in his best books. And I've seen it other places as well, so I was really glad that I finally picked it up. And like the Island of Missing Trees, there's two timelines. In this one, I think it's 1970 as well as contemporary. It's about race relations and misogynoir. And it did remind me of Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid, but it's better. Yes, it's got more heft to it, I would say, and very distinct differences in the different voices, because it keeps switching, like an oral history. I absolutely loved it. And Opal, she's such a great character. She's just fantastic. Kind of an Afro-punk singer. I also read this graphic novel history of the Black Panther Party, and it's by David Walker and Marcus Kwame Anderson. Marcus Kwame Anderson did the illustrations, and I learned so much. I thought I knew something about the Black Panthers. Now I know a whole lot more, and just how complicated. Well, for one thing, there were a whole bunch of different Black Panther groups, not necessarily affiliated with each other, and then how that shook down until there was finally mostly one group. And it was actually over a really short time period that the most activity happened, like 1966 to about 1970. I found out about J. Edgar Hoover and how much he hated the Black Panther Party, and all of the work that the FBI did to have the leaders falsely accused in various cities and spend years in jail before they were found to be, acquitted of charges. So there's lots of focus on individuals who were members of the Black Panthers. So in addition to background information about their role and a little bit of their biography, the background sheet always has a map of what state they came from. They came from all over the place. One of the great things that they did, they had a school, and they had a free breakfast program. This is what the illustrations look like, nice and bright. So it says here, by April of 1969, the Panthers were running 9 free breakfast programs in Oakland, San Francisco, Vallejo, Chicago, Des Moines, and were feeding over 1,200 children every morning. Yeah. So there's no sugarcoating here. So none of these characters are pure heroes. but none of them are pure bad either. Well, except maybe J. Edgar Hoover and then Nixon. But I highly, highly recommend this graphic novel, History. That free breakfast program reminded me of a children's book that I read some years ago called One Crazy Summer. It's by Rita Williams Garcia, and an 11-year-old girl and her two little sisters go to stay with their mother, whom they haven't seen for quite a while. She's an artist, and she's also been volunteering for the Black Panthers, and she's busy. So they go to a Black Panther summer camp. Yeah, One Crazy Summer. I recommend that one. In the Black Panther Party, they talk about the situation in the States, what led up to the formation of the Black Panther Party. And one of the things they mention is the massacre in Tulsa, Oklahoma. So here's a picture book history of that event. It's called Unspeakable, the Tulsa Race Massacre, written by Carole Boston Weatherford, and the illustrations are by Floyd Cooper. Floyd Cooper grew up in Tulsa, so this was very close to his heart. He's a multi-award winning illustrator who died last year. He was only 65. I think he died in July last year. He uses a really unusual art technique that he calls oil erasure. And the whole book is done in these gorgeous sort of sepia and beautiful brown tones. And he is especially good at doing faces and expressions. So if you're not aware, Greenwood was like right near Tulsa, Oklahoma. And it was a prosperous Black community. There were some 10,000 people living there. And because of segregation, they were totally separate from the white people. And the white people were jealous of how prosperous they were. So there are 2 Black-owned newspapers, over 20 churches, 15 Black doctors, lots of grand homes. Anyway, there's an archival photo that's used for the end pages, and you can see how the homes and businesses were burnt to the ground. The white rioters kept the fire trucks from even going to put out the fires that they started. In the notes at the end, it says, for a long time we knew it as the Tulsa Race Riot, but some people have said the word riot was just a way to further injure the Black community. Insurance companies didn't have to pay for damage to homes and businesses caused by a riot, so this meant Black folks had to find other ways to pay to rebuild what they'd lost. And so more recently, people have started calling it the Tulsa Race Massacre. And I think there were something like 300 people who died. And it was all because a 19-year-old boy maybe stepped on the foot of a 17-year-old white girl who was an elevator operator. He was put in jail. A white mob wanted to lynch him. And yes, and that's what started this. Very important book with great information an important aspect of history with beautiful photographs. This would be like for older children all the way up to adult. So I would say maybe grade 3 or 4, grade 4 and up. Here is an entirely different kind of picture book. The Rock from the Sky. It's by a Canadian illustrator, Jon Klassen. He lives in the States. And you might know him for his I Want My Hat Back, and there's a couple more hat books. And these characters are a little bit similar. Well, they're a lot similar. Here's the turtle. Jon Klassen uses a collage digital technique, and this one is actually, you could call it an early reader or emerging reader for children who are just beginning to read. It's got simple words. It's got 4 separate stories in it. And we know from the title, The Rock from the Sky. And we have pages where we see a rock in the sky. Hello, hello, what are you doing? I'm standing in my favorite spot. Come, stand in it with me. Okay. And can you see there's a different color used, so you can see this is one person's talking, another person, the first person, the second person. And that just helps children figure out dialogue. So the aardvark has a bad feeling about that spot. So he says, I want to go to that other spot over there. How does that spot feel? I cannot hear you. You are too far away. I'm going to come back. And this time, it's in all caps, which, as you know, that convention is for yelling. So that works really well, too. And we still have a rock falling from the sky. This time it's further down. And fortunately, the turtle goes over to say his spot is better. He tells the armadillo and the snake. And while he's over there, something happens. It's a picture book, that's not spoilers. And there's 3 more stories. But what Jon Klassen can do with the eyes, you see how they're saying, whoa. So much expression just in the eyes. All right, he writes pretty dark stories, but they're also funny, really funny. And I think adults laugh just as much as kids do for these stories. So that's Rock from the Sky. And to tell you about another audiobook, a memoir called Lost and Found by Kathryn Schulz. And there is a rock that falls from the sky, a meteor, in that book that's found. She writes about how unlikely it is to find a meteor, and so it's unusual to meet somebody who's found one. It's not quite like any other memoir I've read, because the focus is on Kathryn's emotional life. The first part is talking about her beloved father dying. The second part is talking about her finding the love of her life and marrying this woman. And The third part, it starts out with the etymological history of the ampersand, and it goes on to kind of muse more generally about connections and how important connections are in our lives. And it's just beautifully done, tender but clear-eyed, very precise prose that's just a joy to listen to. The author reads her own audiobook, and I loved it. It's a graphic novel. This one is a fiction. What's it called? Fictional Father. It's by Joe Ollmann. And the way it's written, you could almost believe that it is about Joe himself, but apparently no, it is fiction, and it's a cartoonist whose father was a famous cartoonist, and he was an asshole, and his son, who's writing the story, is also, yeah, he's got a huge chip on his shoulder. He's pretty hard to like, but he does. He really did grow on me. Yeah, it is in color, which I think this is the first time that Joe Ollmann, who's a Canadian cartoonist from Hamilton, I think it's the first time that he's done color, and yeah, it works really well. A guy with a midlife crisis. And last of all is a collection of essays by Jeanette Winterson. I will read anything Jeanette Winterson writes. So this one, the subtitle is, 12 Bytes, because there's 12 essays. And how we got here and where we might go next. It is about artificial intelligence, way back into that history, Ada Lovelace, very feminist, very witty, very smart. So many passages I loved that I am going to be recording in my commonplace book, so I don't forget all these interesting things that she had to say. There were just a few times where I noticed tiny errors, like the head of the Tokyo Olympics. His name was one letter off, so it was a bit of a misspelling there. I don't know how that error happened, but more importantly, it was what he said, which was that he actually had to stand down because he said that women executives talk too much. And Jeanette Winterson writes, how would he know? According to the Japanese Business Federation, in 2019, women occupied just over 5% of the executive positions in Japan. Yeah. And then what was that other error I noticed? She talked about a place in West Dakota, and I thought, I know there's a North Dakota and a South Dakota. Well, I looked up that organization that she was talking about, and it is in South Dakota, so there was a bit of an error there as well, which is unfortunate because when a book is full of facts, you want to be able to trust all the other ones. And actually, I do. And there's an extensive bibliography at the end as well. And, many times I would Google to find more information, and just so fascinating. So just one little bit that I'll talk about is sex bots. So AI-capable sex dolls are available, and she talks about the effect that can have on society. So, for example, what if somebody's got one of these dolls that he likes to dress up in, professional clothes and pretend the doll is his boss. And then how does that change how he deals with a female boss? That's just one, tiny example of how society will be affected. Yeah. So I'm at 30 minutes. I'm not going to talk about the cookbook. Well, I'll tell you which cookbook it is, and you're going to wait till next week when I'll have a whole lot to say about Baking with Dory by Dory Greenspan. I've already been testing a bunch of the recipes, so I think I might be done with it by next Friday, and I can tell you what I think. So I'll put a few photos of things that I've made so far, but I'll tell you more next time. Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much for watching, and I'm always happy to hear comments from you, so please put them on down below, and let me know what you think of any of these books, and I will see you in the next one.